Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our very small session here. My name is Ameer Sarfarazhusain Ameeree. I am a 15-year-old student at Al Diafa High School, Dubai, and I would be your host for the Rewired 2021 talk that we're going to have today. So, with us here is my debate team and our panelists that are professional public speakers. And I've known them for quite a lot of time. And I can't wait to have a very insightful conversation on education with them. So, without further ado, I would like you to introduce yourselves and probably mention a fun fact about yourselves while you do that, just like an icebreaker. So, yeah, go ahead.
Hello and good morning. My name is Hassan and I study in Al Diafa High School. Currently, I'm doing my IGCSEs, and a fun fact about me is that I love designing and debating, two entirely different hobbies, but I enjoy them the most.
Well, hello there. My name is Sarfarazhusain, and I'm a 15-year-old kid studying the sciences in Al Diafa High School. A little fun fact about me is that I simply can't ride a bike or swim properly just because I can't balance my body properly. I know that's bad for the fact that a 15-year-old child who's supposed to be entering their adult age in like about 3 years can't ride a bike, but I can't help it. So, anyways, going back.
Oh God, I mean, well, that balances it out because like you're pretty good in studies. But anyway, thank you for those fabulous introductions. But without further ado, we'll be getting into the session and starting off with our introduction. Not introduction, we'll be starting off with our questions. So for the first question, what is the true purpose of education? Go ahead.
Well, I'll start off from there and then I'll pass it on to Hassan. Well, let's talk about this from the point of economics. Well, education stands to make sure that the future of our society, is comprised of those who are willing to benefit the economy and the world around them by working in various industries, whether it be primary, secondary, or tertiary. However, I have to also make the sentiment that education is so much more than just a long term investment for the future. It forms our perspective and our mentality to the world around us, to learn and to interact with it and to create innovation. That's the whole point of education beyond just economics, to create a future for our children. And yeah, now that's what I have to say about education and its true
Yeah,
purpose.
but the way you talk, Taruka, you're trying to kind of refer to the fact that education is more of the reason for education is to benefit the economy, as you mentioned in your earlier part of the speech. But I believe that education is something which is more about individualism and how it is something which benefits an individual, a child, more than it does to an economy. An economy benefiting is just a side factor to a person benefiting individually. Now, education is something every child thrives to gain and every parent struggles to give. It is the most essential part of life. Without it, you cannot even get a proper salary or learn good enough. Now, education doesn't really mean a degree. Education could be anything from having knowledge from a library to learning from scrapbooks in the dustbin. Education is about gaining knowledge, about exploring your capabilities and understanding your true potential to actually make benefit of it and progress as a person. So it doesn't really have to be of taking a degree. And the entire purpose of education is to increase the quality of life. And as all of that is happening, the economy benefits as a side factor, which is also something good for the economy. But that isn't the sole purpose of education.
Well, Hassan, I do have to agree with you that individualism is an absolutely integral part of our education system. However, I would have to disagree with your part stating that education is a side, or I mean, the economical development that education brings is just a side venture, and that individual is the main focus. You have to note that for the education, the economy is the priority, whereas individualism is the side venture. Now, the reason why I say this is primarily because of the fact of the education system that we are holding in our current world. And that is about grading and marking and making sure that we get those A stars, because those A stars is what determines whether we are getting into a good university or not. And whether we enter a good university or not is what determines how we contribute to the economy, how we go on with our careers. And that's an important thing to focus on when we talk about education, because the primary aspect of it is for us to contribute to the economy and ultimately create a better world for the generations to come. And yeah, but individualism on itself is not something that is focused on entirely by education, because education only seeks to aim for the majority of the people, not every single person that's there.
Yeah,
Because
but don't you believe it is a flaw in the education system? And when you say that economy is a priority, it doesn't really make sense because, see, the economy is benefiting because the government provides education to children, right? Now, why does the government do that? The government was made for the welfare of the society so that the individuals can benefit from it, right? So the government is trying to help children get education. And when they gain education, they benefit the economy as a side factor, as I mentioned earlier. And when the economy is benefiting, what is the result of that? Individuals are
ultimately
benefiting.
speaking, yeah.
No, see, the thing is, individuals benefit from a better economy, their quality of life is increasing. So, technically, a better economy is the purpose of a better economy is to benefit individuals. So, here, like directly or indirectly, better education does directly relate to the fact that education is meant to increase the quality of life of an individual and not the economy as a priority.
Well, let me bring some sociology into this equation and this discussion that we're having. So, functionalism, which states that our society, that every single part of our society is made to ultimately have a better purpose, to ultimately make sure that every single part of it makes a better society in the long term, states that education in itself is made to make sure that our economy is compromised of a better future. It's to make sure that the individuals that are in it are to contribute and to make a difference. All right, but we have to note that the individualism that we talk about is not exactly something that the government is wanting to provide to you. It's something that is a reward as a result of contributing to the economy. The more social status that you gain, the more individualistic aspects that you gain, is the more you is a result of more contribution to the economy, is a result of you making a better difference in society. And that's something important to note, that individualism is not something that the government is directly providing to us, but rather it's a result of a reward to make sure that we ultimately contribute to society and the economy in the future. So yeah,
But that
that's
doesn't really make sense because what you're trying to say is that the government's main aim is to improve the economy. And if we help them do that, then they would basically give us a reward by better quality of life. But that doesn't really make sense because why do you even think that the government wants to make the economy better? It's not like the government owns the economy and we are sort of their slaves and we want, like, they want, like, if we help them improve it, then they would reward us for it. It is entirely the opposite. We at the starting were just a bunch of people who lived in a village, and then those people, they voted a person and they voted a government to run them because they needed a leader to guide them and to improve their life. So the entire purpose of a government is to help individuals and not the economy. And when you say the economy, like government is making the economy better, it is simply because a better economy means a better quality of life for the people and a better and more safe environment for people to live in, because there would be less risk factors that the entire currency could just like be vanished like it happened in Zimbabwe. Okay, so the entire point of it is that education is meant to help individuals entirely, and the economy benefits as a side factor, which again as an end result benefits the individual, because economy isn't a object, it isn't a substance which is benefiting and growing. It is something which is helping us individuals improve our quality of life.
all right. Just a small correction I have to make over there is that when the government is being when the members of the government are being voted upon, it's done by society and not just a bunch of individuals. Now, since the government works for the sake of society and for the sake of the economy, they would always want to make sure that the future ahead of us is always comprised of individuals who are capable of providing for it. The government might want us to the government gives us individualistic aspects because they want to make sure that we have incentives to work towards making a better economy. And that's what I want to make something clear, that every single aspect that you described of individualism, of better rewards and better status in society, and high quality standards of life, is the fact that it's purely based off the rewards that the government is expecting us to fulfill a role of making sure that we contribute to the economy and ultimately create a better society and a better future. it is upon us as as the citizens of a country or a resident of a country to make sure that it happens at a fast pace. So yeah.
But I just like to point out one thing. You said that a government is voted not by individuals and by a society. Now that literally means that the society, they together come and they decide that one person should win, and as a whole they give one vote, and that one vote is the reason, is like the government which is elected. But that is not true. Like what instead happens is every individual, regardless of the influence by their society or family members, they are given the opportunity to vote. Okay, and that individual vote is what counts, and not the entire societal, like a whole vote. It is an individual choice, and the majority wins.
All right, it is important to note that it's ultimately the entirety of society who's taking part in these democratic trials that you're talking about. However, that question and the statement itself is irrelevant because regardless of who votes for the government ultimately has to work for the people, for the entirety of society, and not just the people who voted for them. And that's why my stance is, yeah, valid.
Talking about relevance, I think we are quite off the topic and not talking about education anymore. So let's move on towards,
Of course.
let's progress further towards, yeah.
Exactly. Wow, that was a very insightful discussion. That was very boisterous. We did move on to well, we moved on to like sociology, society, and sense of individualism in education and how education helps us progress. Wow, that was actually quite insightful. That was very good to hear different views from both of you. So, yeah, I mean, I do agree with both of you. I believe that it's just different perspectives. If you look at it from a society's point of view, of course, it's the economy. If you look at it from a government's point of view, it's the economy. If you look at it from like an individual's perspective, it is of course the individual's perspective, the economy, or his own education. So it's just about perspectives, and yeah, that's a very creative debate, and hopefully we can have that debate next time. So without any further ado, now we're in the pandemic around us. You see that the virus is spreading, and many schools had shut down, especially in the UAE. The UAE was one of the top 10 countries to have the lockdown for the longest amount of time. So over here now, schools implemented digital learning. So my question to you now would be that how do we ensure that digital learning leaves no student behind? Go ahead.
Okay, so when you say that, we basically want to make sure that digital learning is as effective as initial face-to-face learning, or better or more effective. Well, for that, obviously the teachers and parents have to give a sort of contribution, and they have to give an effort. But all that effort is entirely pointless if a student doesn't give an effort. The main responsibility is of the child to actually be focused in learning. Now, if a child takes an advantage of online learning and he doesn't really focus in classes, or just gives an attendance and goes back to sleep, or he does something of mischief, an act of mischief, well, that is basically something which is harmful to him and not the parents and the teachers. So no matter how much effort they give, they can't really force a child to study, unlike in face to face. Now, if you go to school, you have no other choice but to actually study. Now, I agree in face-to-face learning too. There would be cases where you would just not listen to the teacher talking. But at the end of the day, when you realize the importance of studying, there would be a certain point when you would just start studying at school. And it is nothing like teachers are forcing an individual to do. It is something for their own benefit. But that same thing cannot happen in online learning because they can't really force you. So I think the main thing our society at the moment should do is raise awareness of the importance of education at the moment, and how much harmful it would be. Just this one moment of mischief could cause years of regret to a child's life, and how we should raise more awareness of the importance of education. So they give an effort from their side, so that the effort given by teachers aren't an entire waste, but it is actually like getting an impact.
True. I absolutely agree with your sentiment, Hassan, that students should absolutely make sure that they are the ones who are also making the effort. However, we have to also make sure that we create the same environment. At least we have to try and emulate the same environment that we have created from a school, from sitting in a classroom, sitting on desks, sitting on chairs, looking at the board, looking at the teacher discuss about mathematics or science. We want to make sure that that same system is somehow emulated and simulated in an online learning platform. And the reason for this is primarily due to the fact that we have worked focused on such a system for a long time. and that system, even regardless of its flaws, was still effective to the majority of the students present. So we have to make sure that that system is what we have practiced and what we have to implement in our online systems of learning. So
Yeah,
forward,
but I
yeah.
don't think that you should have the entirely same environment or the same atmosphere, because that is basically not possible, because these are two entirely different locations. So now, if a child was studying in the USA and then he moves to the UK, the atmosphere and the entire environment of studying would entirely change. And that is only when you're changing location of face-to-face learning, right? But over here, we are going from our schools to a virtual environment, and that is entirely different, and you cannot achieve the same environment, or like the most we can try is to have a similar environment, or an environment which is effective enough to study and learn effectively. That is what we can try to have. But if we aim to have the same environment as we do in face-to-face learning, that would be very inefficient, because that is something which is impossible, and aiming for that is sort of pointless and a waste of time, because you aren't really achieving anything. How can you expect children to unmute their mics and just start talking while the teacher is teaching? Or why would you even want a student to eat in his class as they would normally hide and eat at the back of the classroom? That is the environment you're talking about. Well, that doesn't really make sense, because in online classes you could just switch off your camera and just start eating, and no one would be bothered, and a teacher won't really punish you or take you to the head teacher or take you to the head of secondary. There won't really be consequences of your actions, because no one can see your actions. So having the same environment is impossible, and even if you manage to have the same environment, it is sort of pointless. The same effort could be given in improving other factors which could have a huge impact upon the learning pace of students.
Hassan, I absolutely agree with you that we can't completely change our environment from a real life school into an online setting, which is why I mentioned that we have to simulate it, and we have to try and emulate such a system. And when I say that we have to simulate an environment from a real life classroom, I mean that we have to make sure that formal procedures such as rules, such as verbal warnings, final verbal warnings, expulsion, suspension, all of that is still structured into the online learning model that our school creates for us. Because when we look at it from the point of view from a classroom, that's a very effective system in making sure that students follow behaviors and what is expected of them in the classroom. And that's what I primarily mean, that when we try to create an environment which is befitting of that of the original status quo that we originally had, due to the fact that uh, when you actually looked at the old environment of that of a classroom, you could see that there was students were always, regardless of the few bad apples within that classroom, there was still the majority of those students were still listening to everyone there, and that created an organized and a formal environment for students to learn and to educate themselves in a environment which is quiet and silent and progressive towards their own future, which is what I meant when I said that you have to try and simulate and emulate such an environment for the children. Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. Like, if you're talking specifically about rules and the procedure of how a classroom is run, then that is it makes sense, because you're trying to achieve a more formal procedure of how, like, the way teaching is taught, because that is what they're used to. And moving to something which basically an environment where you have no consequences for your actions is not only bad for a classroom environment, but also overall. And I think it is not really a good thing to happen. Yeah, I get
Yeah.
you. I entirely agree with your point of trying to
Yeah.
adapt
Your point was.
to a similar formal procedure.
All right. Wow, that was perfect. That was quite insightful again into the topic of education, the way you adapt to different environments, and the ways that this could be done. So that usually does play a very good role in providing accessibility to one and all, and to make sure that in digital learning, students are not left behind in the same experience that they might get in a classroom, but in the ethics and the moral codes of the online or the digital platform itself. So, yeah, the 2 points are very, very important. And with that, we now move on to the next question on the list. So, there's a very big debate about whether grades should be included in the education system or not, whether students should be marked and how they should be marked, whether they should be placed, and that's a very philosophical debate, and there are, of course, two sides to it. So, seeing that our conversation is going very well, I thought about this question as one that would truly be intriguing. So, well, my next question would be, what do you think is the purpose of grades? What do you think should or should not be there or placed in the education system, or it should be measured if so? And if you think it should not be measured, if you think that the current education system is flawed, do provide an alternative to your solution and how they could carry it on. So yeah, go ahead.
All right, I guess I'll start off with that question. Well, firstly, to make sure that there's no misinterpretations in what I said, I would like to say that the systems that we do have in place are flawed. So without any stoppers, let's just start ahead. Firstly, when we talk about grades, I think that they're an absolutely important way of making sure that we calculate a student's capabilities within a particular subject. If a student scores a 38 out of a 100 in a math test, that simply means his level of math is too low. Based off what he has done wrong in that test and based off his grades, the teacher can analyze his mistakes and his strengths and make sure that he does even better for the next tests that are ahead of him. And I think that's a very effective system in doing so. However, I would like to state that the execution as to how that system is being done is what's being wrong. Because firstly, we have to remember the fact that that the school systems and the education systems both alike contribute to only 75% of the students who are in the school, not 100%. And when I mean this, I say people of determination, people who are intellectually not capable of doing certain things, people who are of different race, different gender, different creed. All of these factors alone creates a different treatment amongst teachers towards these students. And that's a problem that I want to focus on. And that's why 75% only get benefit from the system, whereas the other 25% does not, which is why we have to make sure that we create an education system which is accessible to these people as well, because that way the school system can also get influenced by that education system and also improve itself. Now, methods as to how the education system could improve is maybe having different grade thresholds based off certain batches in certain schools. Maybe you could increase the thresholds between how you could get an A star within a certain subject uh, per year, depending upon
But don't you
students.
think that shouldn't be variable? The threshold really depends upon the performance, the overall performance of students across the world in the same like sort of studying. Like if you're talking about IGCSEs, then the overall performance of students is what determines the entire threshold. And if you like change it because just to improve the education system, that is sort of unfair. Also, just to add on to your arguments, I mean, it is a subjective thought and decision, and it doesn't really make sense if just one opinion is considered. So the other side of the argument is that when grading systems are used, they basically average out the marks throughout the entire year. That includes a test and the final exams. And that is quite sensible to do, because if you take like the performance of a student overall, like just their participation in class, and you mark that, it doesn't really make sense, because well, in a grading system, a child is writing what he understands, and that is a really good way to measure what have they understood and what is their like potential and what are they learning at the moment. And it is a way to measure and grade students without bias. Because if you have a grade, if you have a system otherwise, it wouldn't really be that unbiased, because in a grading system, people have to follow a certain marking scheme and accordingly like their grade, and non-academic factors don't really affect their grades. And talking about how 75% only receive that uh, advantage to it, that privilege, well, don't you think that is a problem in the school system and a problem with the teachers and not a problem in the education system? Because the education system was designed to be perfect. It was designed to fulfill its role, and it was designed to be flawless and basically give what it is supposed to give, a fair mean to grade students and allow them to be like graded properly, so that teachers can identify what are they lacking and do they have. But if teachers fail to do so, or the school system is discriminative and it fails to do so, that isn't a problem in the process of grading, that is a problem in the execution, and you can't really blame the entire education system for that. Now, one more thing I'd like to point out is that you see there are some students who are in that active in classrooms. They don't really like participating, or they are just they're introverts basically. They don't like socializing, but they inherit the knowledge they're given by the teachers very quickly. They're very smart, they have the potential, and they can showcase that during an exam. They can write out what they believe, they can write out what they have understood, and that is very fair to these kind of children and basically everyone, because when they benefit children who are unlike them, they also write what they have understood. And that is a fair mean to grade everyone, because we're not targeting just a set of students. We want to grade every student equally, and grading is indeed a perfect match to do so. And also when you grade students, right, there is a sort of challenge which creates, okay, there's a thing that whoever gets the highest mark is the smartest. Now that would although cause stress to some students, but don't you think that if you're stressed about your exams, how would you survive in your later life? So it is actually an opportunity to adapt to the stress. Now, keeping the stress aside, the competition provides students an incentive to work hard to actually get good grades, and that is actually beneficial towards them.
Actually, now that I think about it, Hassan, I think your points about grade thresholds are definitely good, and that they're definitely that increasing them would just make it a bit more pointless. I guess I was on the thought process of making better incentives for people of determination and other type of people who are intellectually not capable of doing something to be capable of having better incentives, being more motivated to study a particular subject. Because when we look at it, when you get a low grade in a certain subject, you are led to believe that you're not capable in that subject. If I get a 38 out of 100 in maths, I'm led to believe that I am not good at it, at the subject itself. But yeah, that's a definitely unique perspective that you've brought, Hassan. So which is
But
why,
don't you think that is like a flaw in the mentality of the student? Like, if you talk about me personally, if I get a bad grade in math and I am basically disappointed by myself, wouldn't that create an incentive for me to work harder and score better in my next exam rather than being depressed about it and being like, I'm not made for the subject? Now, also, if you get bad marks in a subject, you are also able to identify in which uh, subjects are you good at. Now, that is the reason we are taught every subject until grade 10. And it really makes sense, right? Because if I learn history, geography, that basically helps me identify what career should I pursue in my further studies, what university should I go to, what course should I do, because of my grades, which have allowed me to identify in an unbiased form that what am I good at and what should I do in the future. Don't you think that is a really good advantage of the grading system?
yes, I do think that's a very good method of the grading system. However, we have to note that stuff like being let down by grades, being let down by all of that, it is not really a mentality that is artificial. It is a mentality that is there because of human psychology, of the fact that we are led to believe by everyone else that we're not capable, and it's not a mentality that we can easily change. However, it's a mentality that we can utilize to improve people because when often when people think that they're not capable enough, they're either pushed to the limit to make sure that they meet expectations, or they just let down and they just fail. So I think what we could do is make sure that people exceed their limits and make sure that they're doing their absolute best to improve. So yeah, that's what I believe.
Yeah, but I just like to point out one more thing. If something is not easy to achieve, it doesn't mean that we step back. If
Yeah,
something is hard, we should like
that's
give our
true.
best and at least try to bring the little change, because something is better than nothing, which we have learned since day one, right? So
Yep.
instead of regressing, it is better we progress, but slowly, at least we should. Now, I think we are kind of going off the topic a little bit, so let's move
That is
on.
absolutely true. We have to not step back. Yep, indeed.
Okay, wow. So again, that was quite insightful. We always love stepping off the topic and just, I don't know, focusing on random stuff. That's pretty good. When you're talking about education, you can't help but link so many things to it that you get away from the relevant point at hand, which is amazing and which shows that our conversation is going pretty well. So with that, I 100% agree with both of your points. That's a good way to move forward. And I believe that if we actually follow that, we can probably have a better education system in place, a system that would provide and promote better learning and make sure that all students are probably more successful than they are at this point in time. So that is actually pretty good. Talking about success, I think about innovation. I think about the new technology coming out today. You see flying cars and AI everywhere. You see random stuff happening that was unimaginable probably a decade ago. So right now we are in that very decade. And my question to you would be that if you were to reimagine the future of education, what do you think it would look like? Go ahead.
Okay, the first thing I'd like to point out is that we do not see flying cars around the world. That is just a expectation we had a few hundred years ago, but we were not successful in achieving that. The only thing we achieved was autopilot cars, which aren't that effective. Now, talking about the future of education, it is pretty decent. It is going to be quite good. It is going to be first class education all over the world. And our main aim is to provide education to everyone, regardless of who they are, right? That is our main aim, to give education to people, whether they are a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, whether whoever they are, whatever color they are, whatever nationality they are, that doesn't matter. Our aim is to give education to everyone and the same quality of education, or at least a good quality of education. And I think we can achieve that because the rate we are progressing at the moment is quite good. But what is the purpose of education? So you have the potential to actually like get a better job. Talking about jobs, we're talking about the future, right? A robot could do your job. Just imagine you take 5 years to master in an MBA or master engineering or to learn something, and when you go to get a job, a robot is doing your job, and they had learned the exact same thing you had in a matter of an hour via a USB transfer from Google or something. Is that really fair? Because education's entire purpose was to give people a good job and to increase the quality of life so they get money which is the most essential part of life, right? But you cannot get that because although you're talking about the future, a really advanced thing, because everyone loves new technology, you would like to have foldable smartphones, flying cars, as you said. But what is the consequence of that? Robots would also be something. AI is progressing faster than it ever has, and we are entering the fourth industrial revolution. And although we might not like it, we are witnessing change we will have to adapt to regardless of what we believe. And that would also cause robots doing our jobs and us losing our jobs, and basically terminating the entire point of education. And I think that education might have a good future, but the impact of education has a terrible future unless there are government actions taken for it, and basically something to control the environment of robots taking jobs, which is a threat to mankind.
Hassan, I absolutely agree with your point on AI and technology. In fact, there's a statistic put out by the World Economic Forum about how 60 million jobs are going to be displaced by artificial intelligence in the coming future. However, most of these jobs tend to be within the primary and secondary sectors of the economy, which don't really require skilled labor that often. However, the tertiary sector, on the other hand, the World Economic Forum states that 175 million jobs will be created as a result of AI coming into existence. This is where education comes into more importance in the future, and that's how
I'd
I
like to
reimagine the
stop you
future.
there just for I'd like to stop you there just for the cause of inaccuracy in research. The research you're referring to at the moment is about automation. And I'd like to point out one thing: automation is entirely different from AI. When we talk about automation, we refer to washing machines or a smartphone or something like that. Automation is meant to assist a person in doing a particular job. And that could be a massager, that could be a hairdryer, it could be anything. But you're talking about AI, and AI is something which does the entire job for you and not just automation. A very good example of automation would be when washing machines were created. All laundry workers were traumatized. They were like, oh my God, someone's going to take my job. What do I do now? They were angry. They were angry at people who got innovations into our life, right? Now, that was what happened. But now look at our lives. Washing machines created factory jobs, they created laundry jobs, accountants, managers, workers, like factory workers, labor, like so many more jobs were created. Now, if you take that example, you're referring to automation and not AI. And that is something which we overlook most of the time in most of the arguments of a robot versus humans, right?
Hmm.
So I think that is one thing we should take a look at, that we are talking about AI and not automation, and AI will definitely take a job. And a really good example of it would be, for example, at a salad, before you used to have workers answering their call center when you call them. I could guarantee you when you call them right now, an AI is going to pick up the phone. And it might not be very convenient, but it is way better than it ever was. The day one when it was first implemented, it was terrible to use. But if you call them now, they are just as helpful as a human, and it is better for some people who do not like to socialize. But what is the consequence? All those thousands of workers working at Etisalat at the call center, their job is gone. For what? Just so that the firm, the business, doesn't have to pay the high expenses, the salaries, or pay for the working environment of those workers, right? Now, that is the consequence you're talking about.
I absolutely agree with you, Hassan, that I may have had a factual inaccuracy when I was talking about artificial intelligence, that I may have been talking about automation as well. But here's the thing, I think a lot of systems of automation are created by artificial intelligence as well. And that's what I was referring to when I was talking about the World Economic Forum. So, yeah, I do agree with your point that many people are going to be losing their jobs due to AI. And that's why the education system should be focusing on the tertiary sector, such where skilled labor such as doctors and engineers would definitely come into place. So, yeah, that's how I reimagine education to be in the future, to be skilled labor.
Yeah, just another thing, it might be a bit off topic, but it is worth mentioning that people often say that when robots are created, humans will be required to maintain those robots, to make those robots, and to do whatnot. Now, take a look at a robot is capable of making something for us humans. There might possibly be a time where the robot is making the robot in the factory. So there might meeting ended. Either way, I'm just going to repeat that point, which I was referring to. I was talking about how AI can make stuff for us humans, right? They can create a technology which us humans can use. There might as well be a point that that same AI would be making robots for themselves. Like in a factory, a robot would be making a robot. That would entirely terminate the entire section of sector of jobs for humans making those robots and maintaining them. Now, we also say that robots would need training if they enter the medical industry. Well, for how long? You're going to train them for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? What about after that? A robot, once is trained, they do not forget it. And one robot being trained means that the entire same information or that data could be transferred to millions more of robots, right? So that could happen at a point. And we're talking about the future. A future is not limited to 1 or 2 years. It is infinite, right? So when I say that there would be no jobs for humans, well, it is quite true because there would be none. But if you look at it, it might as well be beneficial to us. There might be a point where robots are doing everything for us and we have to do nothing, just sit at your house and wait for a meal to be provided to you by a robot. That could be an instance in the future, but we're not really sure of what could happen. Either way, we are way too off the topic. So let's hop back onto the topic of education and what were we entirely talking about in the first place? The future of education, right? Now, the future of education, as mentioned earlier, is very bright. It's just that the impact of education or the result of education is going to be a little bit threatened, but we can sort of improve that if we give an effort.
Exactly. Wow. So I feel like, yeah, the future looks quite amazing at this point in time. We had a good debate about automation and AI, which was really insightful. And with that, that was nice. We'll be now moving on to our last question. So we had this amazing discussion. We had this amazing debate about education. So my very last question to you would be that imagine you were giving a talk for Rewired in front of like 1,000 people. What message on reimagining education would you share? Go ahead.
Well, firstly, when I start off, what I want to tell in front of 1,000 people is the fact that education has to evolve like how our society is evolving right now. Right now, we're having acceptance of different types of communities, like that of people of determination, people of the LGBTQ organization, people of race, people of different creeds, and this is what education should focus on when we talk about progression, ultimately a dynamic way of making sure our future is secured and stable, right? We have to make sure that our education systems focuses on equal treatment to every single individual, regardless of their physical features, regardless of the of whatever intellectual disability they were born with. Because of that, what I aim to talk, what type of message I aim to create is equal execution of education to every single person out there without any discrimination whatsoever.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you. Like, if you take a look at the UK or the US, and I say, think, what is the first thing you think of when you say the UK or the US in terms of education? We would think of millions of
Freedom of
universities
speech.
and yeah, freedom of speech. You can do whatever you want, and everyone has access to education. Although there might be large amount of discrimination, the access to education is a lot. Okay, now there is discrimination. People are not given the same rights as other people, but at least there is the availability of that education. Now, if I tell you to take a look at Bangladesh, India, or Pakistan, and I say, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when I say education in those three countries? Well, the only thing I can think of is IIT. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. There might be good universities, but not the best. We don't, there is no availability of education. Then how can we guarantee a good execution, or like how can we guarantee everyone being given access to education if there is no availability of education? So our goal at the moment would certainly be that, first of all, making education available in parts of the world where it is not there already, and then making that available education accessible to students of all race and ethnicities, regardless of who they are. Now, because if someone in the Asia or in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, they want to study, they have to leave the country and they have to go to foreign, they have to go to Dubai, they have to go to US or UK or Canada or Australia to learn good education so that they have a proper degree which carries value. But they cannot do the same in their own country. Why? Why should you go to another country just to get education? Why should you ruin the way you live? Because when you go to another country, your entire atmosphere, your entire environment, everything changes. You're far away from your family, you're just living a life alone, and that has a, like, it renovates your entire behavior, it renovates your entire personality. Why should you sacrifice that just to get education? And that is something our world should be focusing on in the future, that you do not really have to like go to a foreign country to get good education.
Right, those are actually very amazing ideas to share on the platform, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people would be interested in hearing your thoughts. Even now, after this amazing discussion, I would have a lot to share about reimagining education, probably about a positive learning environment, about how reimagining education could include motivated teachers, students, probably education being made into a hobby for some student who'd like to be motivated, to be inclusive, and to be for everyone. So those are actually pretty great ideas, and reimagining education gives the future youth a voice for themselves to sustainably develop their world as we are progressing and trying hard to achieve at this point in time. And with that, we would have spoken individually on all of those topics and gone further into detail. But then, sadly enough, due to some time constraints, we would not be able to do that. So, this brings us to the end of our day. However, before we move on, though, the last question for the day, and believe me, this would be the last question for the day. It would be that, what did you learn out of this talk? If any, are there any insights that you'd like to share with us? Is there anything that came to you as a major part of our conversation within this whole talk, or any learning aspect? You may go ahead.
I
Okay,
guess,
so
yeah. Okay, Hassan, go
yeah,
ahead.
so the entire education, whatever we talked about, we explore different aspects of it, different perspectives, because I wasn't looking at only what I think. I had an opportunity to understand what Tarka was trying to say and understand what different views on different topics are. And I think that is really good thing to understand about education, what is the purpose of it, and what is the impact and the future of it. I believe at the moment education is right on track. It might have a few flaws. There might be a few here and there, and I think we're working on improving that. And at the moment, we are progressing very steadily at a very good rate, and we should continue that. There are a few flaws in everything, but as long as we work together as a society to improve at what we're doing right now, we would be very close to achieving what we call as the perfect world.
I absolutely agree with Hassan in the fact that I was able to witness a different perspective and a different viewpoint to education, because my viewpoint up until now has been very unitary, not very open to other people's interpretations of what education should be. But I'm very glad that I got to hear Hassan's opinion as well as Ameer's opinions of education as well. because it definitely enlightened me to different ways of looking at education, that not every single idea that I pose is going to be so smooth. It's not unicorns and rainbows. It's always going to be a rough path when we talk about the future, when we talk about progression. And that's why we should always make sure that we're on the right track and that we're just not giving up on making sure that future happens. So yeah, that's my take on education.
Yeah, 100%. That is so true. Yes. So, and with that amazing conversation, we finally come to an end. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. And thank you so much, Taruka and Hassan, for being here today, for sharing all your insights and all your debate perspectives into the very deep and philosophical talk of education. It was a pleasure to be your host for this talk. And lastly, would finally like to thank Rewired for giving us this platform to speak out and give out our views on education and help them reach across the world and probably improve other people's aspect and views on education by our small talk that we had. And with that, with such an interesting conversation and discussion to explore, we would further like to continue making an impact on the world. And I'm sure we'd all join in this journey to make education a better place for everyone. And so I wish you good luck for your future endeavors. And with that, again, thank you so much. And I hope to see you later. Bye. See you guys later.